Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back to the Three Idiots Talk Aquariums podcast. I'd like to thank you guys all very much for listening to our previous episodes, and we love hearing all the lovely feedback and comments and questions and that you guys all have. So please keep it up. We very much appreciate it. But first off, we'll jump right into what's been going on with everybody recently with the fish rooms and all that. So I don't know if you want to go first, Ryan, but what have you had going on?
Sorry, I just had a big yawn then. That was good. Good start to the day. What have I had going on? Yeah, nothing. Just normal shit. Just cool
Quality.
fish. Just cool fish, man. Just cool fish, Been sorting stuff out, been grading stuff, been, putting stuff into tanks to colour up and look cool. So,
More of the same, eh?
My Lycoma are almost ready to go to new homes, so they'll be going to camp soon, so that'll be good.
Later today, in fact.
Oh, you got a vehicle? Whoop, whoop.
Yes, I do. So I'll be up later today, and we'll be pinching all your fish.
Did you get a warrant?
Nah, I'm gonna borrow my mum's car.
I was gonna say.
So that'll be fun.
Yeah. Probably some fancy Mercedes Benz or something. Has it been a rich shortcut?
Nah, it's a Hyundai i30.
Okay.
From 2010, but it does the job.
It's a nice car still.
Yeah, man.
All right. How about you guys?
What have you had going on, Cam?
Anything fun and exciting going on?
I started cutting some glue off the tank that I pulled apart.
Nice.
Start. I'll get some.
How far through did you get?
I've cleaned the two end panels. They're pretty much good to go. I'll double check it all, and I'll get the bracing all cleaned off this morning sometime. And then I just need a hand to move a couple panels before we can put the side panels on. So hopefully I can get the bracing done today, and then at least one side panel done as well.
Nice. So that's
some progress.
How big's that tank? 2 meters, eh?
2.5 meters.
Oh, yeah. So it's basically 8 footer.
Yeah, 2.5 by 600, I think, from memory.
Nice.
So this one's going to be
This is Clown Loach tank.
Nice. Yeah. And is that going in the shop, or is it going out the back with you?
No, it's coming out in this room here, so it's just going to sit to the right of me. It fits along that wall perfectly.
So that's the start of your office.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So once that's done, then behind me I can put the frontosa tank. But I need that done before we can shuffle everything else in because of room reasons in here. So yeah.
Yeah, otherwise you won't get everything in and out.
Pretty much, it's a jigsaw. This has to come first, and this, and then this, and this. So
I'd probably recommend filling it with water and leaving it like a month before you move it in as well.
I was going to build it in place, which I don't really want to do, but I think just for the pure size of it and having to, get it around doors, and because the door's really close to a wall, like moving 2.5 meters of solid glass might be a little bit tricky. Like it was hard enough getting the stand in. So
actually, yeah, if you're talking a tank that big, it really is a 4-man lift or two really strong men, which we're probably not anymore. You know what I mean? Getting old. So yeah, it was a nightmare getting that sort of thing into an office.
Yeah,
through a tiny door and round a corner.
That really shows the kind of friends you have. When I moved my 2.5 meter tank, it was genuinely like a 9-person lift, and that was not enough people. So I guess you guys are all friends with all tradies and that.
Well, you don't
a bit more muscles.
You don't choose your friends from IT to help you move fish tanks, do you? You know what I mean?
Well, I did, and that was not my smartest idea, but hey, it got there.
Also, if you're an IT, it doesn't mean that you're weak, but you can still be a gym buff, and you can still help us move fish tanks. So
exactly,
we're just stereotyping you.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I've not had anything too crazy. I have a new tank in the shop that I kind of temporarily set up, but I'm not 100% sure how it's going to finish up. It's like a meter long, but it's like 30 centimeters deep and like 30 centimeters tall or something. So it's not that big water volume wise, but it's a nice little tank. So I think it's definitely going to be some form of community fish or planted tank or something. But that's as far as I've got in my plans. At the moment, it's got just the albino cherry barbs that I pulled out of the sales tank. So I pulled out, I think, 5 of them maybe. And those are just going to be the ones I'm going to breed from, but just going to give them a little minute to grow and calm down and fatten up and all this sort of thing. And then there's also a betta in there that I just didn't have anywhere else.
Where'd you put that tank?
Next to the cherry barb tank, and shuffled everything else along / tied it up.
So is it on the bench or is there a stand there?
No, the other side. It's a dual one. It's got quite a nice little like cabinet thing going on. So yeah, but I haven't got any further in the decisions of what to do with that. But that's where it's at now, and it has a bunch of Java fin and krips. So
you could probably breed the cherry barbs in it, couldn't you?
I probably could, but
even divide it maybe if you could divide it in a nice way.
I have another tank I'll breed them in, so
you got that sorted.
That's a bit more. It's like a bit more tucked out of the way because that seems like a lot of space that could be made to look quite nice to not look nice, I guess.
And people go, "Oh, if you got an empty tank," and you go, "No, hang on," and then you spend
There's a bunch
20
of
minutes,
tiny little fish in there.
Spend 20 minutes trying to show them what a fish is, and it's like a pinprick with a hair coming out of it, and you're like, that's not very exciting, is it?
Not as interesting. So yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, that's the plan with that one, and then aside from that, nothing else too exciting's really happened. Just been juggling stuff around, and that's about it, really. So yeah.
Nice.
Like physically picking things up and juggling them.
No, just playing the classic bloody musical fish tanks that everyone's, I'm sure, well aware of. That everyone does.
Can this go with this? How do I make more tanks? How do I make more space?
Yeah, pretty much.
Fun game. So if I shuffle this along, I get an extra 15 centimeters, which is fine because if I move these things along, I can put a full little tank in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. But it's painful. I hate it. But somehow everyone always gets suckered into it. So, what are you going to do, eh?
Yeah, and you've got to make the most of the space that you got, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's always the battle is like fitting as much as I can without fitting too much, trying to find that balance.
It's always something I look up to is when you see someone who's planned a fish room properly, and you can see that it's well planned and everything is meant to be where it is meant to be, not just I got a cheap tank or I picked something else up and I can put this here.
My one was, there's a 20 centimeter gap right here by the door. I'll build a stand and jam 5 tanks in here.
It's more fish tanks. That's the only thing that matters, isn't it?
But it worked, so
can't complain. So yeah. Oh well. Was there any other news or anything you guys had come across the industry that you wanted to talk about today, or should we dive straight into today's topic?
Let's get diving, Captain.
Alrighty. Well, today we're going to be talking about everything that goes around with shipping fish. So that's like from the importers to us, from us to the customers, between hobbyists, all that kind of thing. So the first kind of question I have is if you could, Cam, give a little overview of the shipping process and like how you do it and like what you do and all that kind of thing, in case anyone's unaware of the process.
Cool. So I'll get an order in for some fish, and that's cool. Depending on the day of the week, it might go that day, it might not. So my preference is always to send fish on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. A couple of reasons for that. Preferably Monday because we've had a full day to purge out, being that we don't feed anything on Sunday, so we've had a full day to purge everything out, and then we can do another water change on Monday. So once we go through that, we'll obviously catch the fish, put them in a bag like you normally would any other sort of fish sale. We had a couple of drops of methylene blue in there. So the science behind that is that it helps fish absorb any oxygen, particularly if they're in a high stress situation. So I feel that gives them just an extra possibility of lasting a bit longer if needs be. We then fill the bag up with oxygen, tie it off, then it goes into a poly box with a heat pack, and away you go. So it's fairly simple. There's not too many extra steps compared to just, say, bagging a fish to sort of hand them over to somebody else. So it's a fairly easy process, and everything gets sent overnight. Although I'm well aware that sometimes things don't arrive overnight. We've had fish in transit for 3 days, and they've been absolutely fine. So, but everything does get sent on overnight courier. So as long as the couriers do their job, they arrive the next day.
So when you follow that process and like do all that stuff, what sort of how risky would you say that process is? Like, do you have a number? I don't know if you know a number of like X percentage gets lost or whatever, but how risky in general would you say that process is?
I don't think I've had a fish box get lost at this point. So as far as that goes, it's pretty high. Every now and then they get delayed, and it's generally in the winter time because like road closures or boats get stopped and that kind of stuff. But as far as overall mortality rate, it's very, very low. I think about 2 months ago, we sent some angelfish, and one of them was lost in one died in transit. But like, it's a very, very low number compared to what arrives absolutely fine. Of course,
yeah,
it might happen more that I'm not being told about, but from at least generally speaking, if you buy fish
as far as you can possibly know.
Yeah, people
most people, you think most people, if they arrive dead, considering you offer a DOA guarantee, would get back to you.
Yeah.
So,
very, very slim. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because it does, and that would be just a blatant lie to say it doesn't. But it's not a very common thing for fish to die.
But fish
packaged properly and healthy.
Fish do die on the way home too from a shop as well. Sometimes, you know what I mean. So there is a risk in transporting fish. It's stressful, and it's not good for them, and it's not obviously not recommended. You know, if you can help it, but you have to. You got to, otherwise you're not going to get any fish. So
yeah. I think we underplay the amount of stress on moving for fish, even if it's from one tank to another or bagged up and put in someone else's hands, sort of thing. I think that's we underplay the amount of stress that fish go through, but that's a topic for a different day.
Yeah,
I don't know if it is. I think it's related.
Okay,
definitely related.
So when something that I've noticed, and I mean think a lot about, is like, so obviously the shipping kind of practices are different from when stuff comes from the importer to us compared to from us to the customer. At least for me it is. I'm not an expert on your processes, but like there's usually a lot more fish in the bags, and they tend to be a lot more like skinny and less strong and all this kind of stuff when they're coming from the importer to us. And like there's, for me at least, there's definitely a much higher DOA rate, which is like dead on arrival rate, that way than like from the retailer to the customer. Like my DOA rate for fish is like, it fluctuates between like 0.5 to 1%, but you know, it's not like that includes like, for example, one time I had a courier throw a box of fish over a fence, and the box exploded, and then they all froze. And it's like, that counts, but like that's pretty obviously like not related.
Neglect.
Like that's
It's
just a
neglect.
courier being a dumbass. Then
yeah.
And it's like, so that doesn't really count, but that's all included. But like then when stuff comes from the importers, like it'd be much closer to like 5%. Sort of even creeping up to 8% sometimes, of stuff that just arrives dead, or even if it doesn't arrive dead, it's like, you know, it's got like 12 hours left kind of thing, and there's nothing you can really do about it. And I think that's just to do with the higher stress of like way more fish in way poorer condition per bag. Stuff's going to go wrong, essentially. So yeah.
I think
it's a really interesting. So it's a really interesting discussion, that one, because from the outside looking in, you'd say, hey, these fish have just been quarantined for 6 weeks and conditioned and looked after, and they spent a lot of time and money, and you guys are paying money for them. So you'd think that, they should, 99.9% be good and arrive to you in good condition, so you can sell them.
We don't do that.
But anyway, that's a different discussion.
Yes, that is definitely a different discussion that we will get cancelled for having, but I do agree. But even just from the stress point of view of like that specific sort of experience for them, I find they do so much worse. And like a lot of people say probably like, 8% still isn't that high, but like that's quite high, I think.
It's far too high.
Yeah, I agree, but it doesn't sound like it, but I think the stress is the main cause of that sort of a thing.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to work through that. I think a lot of the wholesalers work on export numbers. So like they'll order neons and they'll turn up in a bag of like 100 or something stupid like that, because they're trying to get them into the country, weighing less and all that kind. Of course, I'm speaking out of place because I don't import, but my understanding from what I've spoken to and heard from, massive numbers in a bag, then they get chucked into the quarantine. So
shipping volume's expensive, right? So they probably get tranquilized. It probably gets put to sleep. It probably gets sedated, I guess.
Possibly, yeah. There probably is
so they get sedated, and then they just get crammed into a bag full of oxygen.
Yeah.
And
so the wholesalers, I think, work on different numbers, and obviously, like, I'll sell 6 neons, for example, in an order that gets sent away. I order 50 neons at a time, so like they'll put 25 in each bag. If someone ordered 50 neons for me, I'd be looking at probably 10 a bag over 4 bags sort of scenario to try and minimize that amount. They're obviously sending out massive boxes of fish all day, every day, massive churn rate. So I think you get a little bit desensitized to it. And it goes from being a live animal to a commodity as well. Oh, you had a DOA, we'll just credit that, we'll move on sort of scenario. So I think there's a few things to work from there. And I mean, that's mainly the reason that when I get fish in, I hold them for a couple of weeks prior to even selling them, making sure that period of stress from transit isn't sort of hanging over, making sure they're all eating. And so when I do go to send them, they're in the best condition they can be to try and get through that next, stress period of a day or two.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because it's not just the sending, is it? It's the settling into the new tank as well, and everything else that goes along with it, adjusting to new foods and water conditions, all that sort of stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, because for me, I don't I don't have the same sort of quarantine regime as you, but it's kind of a bit of a default quarantine I operate off, because I don't sell that many fish, so it would be uncommon for me to sell sort of any fish from a new order within the first week or two, maybe 1 or 2, but if they're even slightly skinny or whatever, I just wait. But normally, if it's no one even asked, to be honest, because I sell more Africans, and breeders is a different sort of conversation. But what I find is it doesn't actually take that much to fatten the fish up and get them bouncing back. Clean water and real good food and close monitoring is the other thing. They tend to something like pea puffers will bounce back in maybe 2 or 3 days. I find if you feed them right. Because for pea puffers, I might sell I mean, I'm probably talking too much here, but I might sell like on average like one pea puffer a month, like nothing. But I'll order them like 30 at a time or 20 at a time, because sometimes someone comes and takes the whole lot, and like they're one that once they're in the tanks, you never lose any, but like getting them settled for the first like day or two is like sometimes it's just like skin and bones, and then doesn't really matter what you do, it's like too far gone. So that kind of stress, I think, obviously, even just like even aside from shipping, just taking them to a new house or whatever is gonna be a struggle. But in terms of the shipping, like that's like, imagine if someone put you in a plastic bag and then you got thrown around in a box for a day, and then you got put into a tank, and then a fish tried to beat you up, and then you couldn't find where the food was, and then the lights are so bright that you can't see what's going on, and then and then you're fucked.
You don't have to imagine that. Who likes moving house? Like how stressful
Yeah,
is
exactly.
moving up and moving out? It will be exactly the same sort of thing. I'm
It's
comfortable
like
here.
It's probably worse.
Have you been? It's like going to Nelson. Like it'd be so stressful because you wouldn't be able to figure out what's going on. And
it's like going to Helensville. It's like going to Helensville, and you have to worry people's pinching your wipers and stuff.
I think a stressed fish is totally different to a sick and ill fish. Like you can see fish are stressed when they come in, but as long as they're not, clearly sick or unhealthy, you can deal with them fairly quickly. It's when they get past that point, it's more difficult to play around with.
The other discussion as well is when they are run down, there is like pathogens and bacteria and all sorts of stuff in your tank that they may or may not have seen before, and when they run down, they're more susceptible to get wiped out by that sort of stuff than if they can beat it up.
I think a very clear example is like with the Africans, obviously, like, well, not obviously, but when something's getting picked on, it doesn't get like smashed in the same way like an American will smash it. It kind of gets like worn down by aggression. But then oftentimes you find like when they're getting worn down, then there's so much like then ick pops up or something, because it's like that fish has got so much going on in its life that its immune system is shot, and then all sorts of random stuff just pops up, and then it doesn't have the resources left to fight that and fight this other fish that's trying to beat it up and trying to get its food and find some territory and all this, and then it all goes to hell basically. So yeah.
You send fish as well, don't you?
Me?
Yeah. Sorry,
yeah.
I was pointing down, not pointing up.
I send fish as well, and I'll talk about that after Cam has.
Cool.
But I have sent fish.
What's your process then, Cam?
So my one is the same. I don't feed for so I only send them on sometimes Mondays, but usually Tuesday and Wednesday. The reason I don't on Monday is I find sometimes the courier is a bit crazy after the weekend. Like they seem to be behind, and like because there's been a few times where on a Monday I book a pickup and then no one ever turns up, and so I've kind of gone away from doing it on Monday. But Tuesday and Wednesday is always fine, and then it like gives the most time possible for like if something does go wrong, then it doesn't get stuck over the weekend. There's like backup days. So Tuesday or Wednesday, don't feed for a couple of days beforehand. Do some good big water changes. Then I always double bag them, because like if the bag gets damaged or something, then there's a backup so they don't end up flopping about. Then chuck them in. Idiot. Then then chuck them in the
It was one of the kids on the way to school.
Classic.
And their phone was ringing for some reason.
Oh, nice. And then chuck them in a poly box with a heat pack. And I know this is a very big area of contention, but I always put a little, not a big, like I get a pen and I stab the top of the poly box and then tape the heat pack on the bottom of that hole inside the box, if that makes sense. So it like covers up the hole, but then it has access to fresh air. Because I find that does a lot more. It basically, the way heat pack works is it like reacts with the oxygen and then generates heat. So if there's no air left in the box, then it doesn't get as hot. So that's kind of the way I do that. And then,
do you think because hot air rises that the hole will drag the hot air out straight off the heat pack if it's taped under it? I've only just thought of that. You said that.
No, because also it would, it's heat is always searching for like an equilibrium. So like the heat would be the cooler area of the box would be the more attractive thing. And also, I don't know if this is mathematically true, but also in my mind, it would prevent the thing from like getting too hot and overheating, because then if it starts getting too hot, then searching for equilibrium, it kind of like would vent out some of the extra hot air, and then it would be fine. Because basically, like, this is completely anecdotal, because like you look it up and there's like a million different opinions, but whenever I've had fish sent to me this way, the heat pack is always like night and day, not even close, like so much hotter than like when it's put in the box and then the box is sealed. So, and it's not like I've had plenty of fish sent to me both ways, so it's not like I'm going like one of each and comparing them. It's like 50 of each method and then comparing them.
So do you think, because from my understanding, none of the wholesalers who send boxes and boxes and boxes of fish every day put a hole in it. So do you think that's best practice that they're doing and you're doing, and vice versa? Or do you think they don't do it by time restrictions? Or
I'm gonna preface what I'm gonna say next by saying, hopefully none of them are listening to this podcast, and if they are, sorry, but I probably wouldn't be following what they do for best practices in terms of fish welfare. I will leave that there.
But you would think that, I mean, they receive fish that are sent for long periods, right? So they know how to ship fish. They're receiving large quantities of. I mean, they basically ship fish for a living. That's what they do.
That's where my question was sort of rolling with. They receive and send on a common basis.
You've dragged me in. I'll go deeper. Basically, from my, obviously I only know my numbers, but I know like my numbers and yes, but from my numbers, they seem to be much more okay with DOAs than I am. So like, obviously there's. But just let me finish what I'm saying, Dick. So there's the trade. So there's the trade-off of like, are we okay losing 4 neons out of an order of $3,000 when the time to, because like obviously like making this little hole and then tidying up all the mess it makes and then like taping on the little heat pack and like proper sealing it up takes like, well, it takes me like probably like an extra 5-10 minutes, which for me doesn't matter with the amount of fish I send. But if I'm sending, $40,000 worth of fish a day, then there's a lot of time to spend where I could roll the dice and lose, some, to be honest, fish that probably cost me like 5 cents, but save that time and that money on like employees' time of packing and doing that. So, yeah, hopefully that makes sense. But that's kind of the way I see it, just going off the numbers that I have, which obviously are incomplete.
Putting a hole in the box is all of what, a minute?
You what? Sorry.
Putting a hole in the box is all of about a minute, so it's not really that
no, but
difficult.
I mean,
like they've got their systems set up in place to run through a production.
The interesting thing here is we're placing an awful lot of weight on temperature, right?
Yeah.
And that being a stressor. If they are sending a big box of fish and all those fish are at temperature, there's an awful lot of thermal mass in there, and it's an insulated box. Correct. So, I mean, I've always found, and I've shipped a lot of fish over the last 20 years, like heaps of them. I don't do it anymore because it's too much hassle. But I've always found that heat packs do stuff all. And yes, I have had the holes punched in the top scenario, and it seems to be logical, but then it seems to be counterintuitive to poke a hole in an insulated box, which you're trying to keep warm. You know, like to me. So, but I would like to see 3 identical boxes, 3 identical waters stuck outside in a winter night, one with a hole punched in the top, one with a heat pack chucked in, and one without a heat pack. What I've found the best way to keep them warm is sometimes I just fill up a 600ml Coke bottle with the tap as hot as it goes and chuck that in the box, and it keeps it warm, you know, and it actually works. The heat
That
packs
actually is a very good idea as well. I have done that before when I've got myself caught short with no heat packs, and it does just as fine a job. The only problem is it might leak.
I've done that,
and then I get in trouble.
Was that?
I've done that and accidentally cooked fish overnight as well.
Yeah, you do have to be careful not to put too much in if it's small area.
There's less wiggle room.
Yeah, there's less wiggle room, but
whatever temperature tap waters at
and
whatever temperature.
I personally think that in New Zealand, especially probably 2/3 of the year, maybe different in the South Island because it is a lot colder and it's a cold shithole. You know, but definitely in the tropical north, and you know, temperature's not. I don't think is as big an issue as for most of the time as it is in the rest of the country. You know, like I think an insulated box with, and it does depend on how many fish you're sending, how much water's in there, time frames, all that sort of stuff. Over a couple of days, obviously, you're going to have issues. I've had issues where the couriers have stuck the box in the freezer, thinking it's thinking it's frozen goods because they send more frozen goods than tropical fish. The fish still made it, but they have to put in their live tropical fish. Please keep warm and deliver ASAP. Otherwise, they put them in the freezer. So yeah, they try to be helpful.
I think with that, one of the when you're talking about, so I don't think you want to keep them fully warm. Like if it's a fish that would normally say be enjoying 26, I don't think you want to keep it at 26 for kind of 2 reasons. Is like, one, obviously less wiggle room, so that's a better avoidable. But then you kind of want to like slow them down a little bit, not like freeze them, but like just a little bit, so that they're not as like obviously stressed and not as kind of going to the toilet as much and breathing as fast and all that kind of thing. So
they're cold-blooded animals, so the warmer they are, the faster they go, the faster they do everything. So
exactly.
The bigger the mess. So it doesn't hurt them to cool down a couple of degrees. If they get in too much, it's just going to add to that stress. So we do need to mitigate the heat loss somehow. I do agree with that. I just don't know what the best way to do it is. But I guess we do have the position to do a very simple trial and figure it out.
Oh,
and if it works, it works.
Guess we'll be sending each other fish all bloody week, and
you don't have to even send them. You just get 3 poly boxes.
Send you an empty box
overnight.
Do you want me to write that on my list of things to try, and then we can write in the description?
I mean, you're probably in the best position to do it because it's probably cold as shit down there at the moment. And Auckland is still above 10 degrees. You know,
so it's freezing in Auckland.
There is
like 11 degrees or 12 degrees at the moment.
On the cars this morning. We are in there.
Yeah, so we want you to do 3 boxes, one with no heat pack.
Yep.
Oh, and I want all the water from the same tank, the same temperature, and the same volume of water in each box.
Okay, I can do that. We'll make that
same
work.
Size box. Yep. One with just a heat pack activated first, like between your hands, make sure it's warm, chuck it in, and then one taped on the top of the box, and then leave them for 24 hours or something.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do what I would normally do. Or 3 o'clock this afternoon, I'll pack them up and I'll stick them outside. And then when I get in tomorrow morning, I'll open them up at, say, 10:30, because that's about when a courier would deliver. And I will take some notes, and I've even got one of those little infrared thingamajigglies. Yep. So I'll take some notes, and I'll let you know.
It'll be interesting to know, because I've always wondered too.
Do you know what I'd want to do? So if you don't know where my shop is, there's a chemist next door, and they always give me all their poly boxes, because that's how they get their, the special medications and stuff. They get them in these poly boxes, and then they don't want them, so they give them to me. And a couple of times they've forgotten. They get these little things, like I don't know, like it's like a little temperature thing, and they put it in, and sometimes they keep them, but sometimes they forget to take them out. And I want to see what that's like, because it's particularly when they're getting sent, because obviously it's maybe the temperature at the depot is very different to the temperature in the truck, and then that might screw with everything. So I'd want to see that and be able to read it of what's happened over the course of the whole sort of journey.
I've got one of them, a brand new one of them hanging around. I wanted to get a couple so I could test a few at the same time, but I never managed to get any extra ones. But yeah, they look,
I used to
plug them in and you get the full readings and everything.
It's not the same thing as what they use. I'd assume they use some sort of medical grade one, but in my old fish room, I had this random crap one that was from it was some random obscure website, and you had to log into the world's most dodgy app to read it. But I had this, it was like a little clock, and it had it was time, humidity, and temperature, and then you log in, and it shows you all the a little graph. And so maybe we could potentially, next time I send you fish, I'll dig that out and see if it still works, and you can send it down. We can send it down, and you can log in and see what happened.
The interesting thing is, I don't think there's going to be any shocks or surprises there, but it might be interesting to see if the temperature. You'd want one that can go on water too, so you'd want to see what the box temperature was doing and what the water temperature was doing.
Yeah.
That'd be.
I was thinking.
The one that I got was for transporting edible salmon and tunas and stuff like that around the world, because obviously if it gets too high of a core temperature, it can't be eaten. So the one that I've got can at least be used in water and stuck into a fish. Not that I'm going to stick it into a fish, but you know what I mean.
I was thinking what you could do is get some sort of waterproof container or something, and then put that in the bag with them. So then it obviously would be. Yeah, but it might still drip, and then obviously you don't want to break it. But something like that, and then it would read the temperature from inside the bag, which would be obviously the most useful part.
Yeah. Let's have a look and see.
I suspect the temperature in the bag will stay relatively high and then just drop gradually. But there might be a period where the heat pack, especially if it's taped onto a hole in the top, produces more heat and does warm it up a little bit. I don't know if it would have the energy to warm up water, but it'll be interesting to see.
Only one way to find out.
Yeah. I'll do those tests this afternoon, tomorrow, and I'll get back to you guys, and we can write it in the description what our findings were.
Maybe what we can do is jump on again and record an extra 5-minute segment, and then I'll do some editing magic and put them together, and then at the end of this podcast there'll be a separate section.
Yeah, I'm down. If anyone wants to see it, leave a comment below. Tell us you wanted us to see that. Oh wait, we've already done this, so people won't be.
We've already done it, and he's going to edit it in straight away.
Idiot.
Now you see what you're supposed to do is we're supposed to clickbait this and say, "Come and see next episode for the definitive thing," and then we'll say we'll do it at the end of the next episode, so they have to listen to it. Come on, you don't do radio. Come on.
Ryan needs to be in charge of all this stuff. I just wing it all, and then we just use all Cam's subs from his Friday coffee dates, and then Ryan's the one who every now and then he doesn't contribute much to the production, but when he does, he's like bloody Jesus.
Yeah, he just
at the end of the day,
he tells us what to do, and then he expects us to do it.
Yeah, he's like, this would be a good idea, but I'm not going to do it.
Hey, fish is your job. Fish is just an obsession for me.
Until you become a Mega Millions fish podcaster, and then you'll ditch the screens.
Additives in water when sending fish.
That's what I was just going to ask you.
Cool. So I obviously use methylene blue. I know plenty of people have used those little bits of polycarbonate or poly something or other?
Polyfill.
Yeah, that's meant to absorb ammonia. I know that there's a couple of big players around the world that use stress coat in all their bags as well.
Yeah.
You do anything? What are your thoughts on that kind of scenario?
This is probably not good, but if you ask me this next week, I guarantee it'll be a different answer. But at the moment, I'm not using anything because I do flip-flop between using and not using methylene blue. But personally, I don't find it makes that much difference in terms of the results. Like, I'd try it both ways, and I haven't noticed much difference.
But it's hard to
I would
quantify,
use. Well, yeah, exactly. So my metric I'm going by is DOAs, which is fine, but it's challenging because it seems either way I do it, it's very low. So it's like, how do I know? You know. But then the thing, you what? Sorry.
That's the safety net. If something happens and it's delayed for X amount of days, it just gives that little bit of extra. At least that's my belief.
I think the science. Exactly. I think the science is there on meth blue that it probably does more good than harm.
Yes.
If you put it in
exactly.
Helps
so it's probably a good practice to add it. The stress coat, I'm not convinced does anything, but again, it probably does more good than harm. So if you've got a bottle of it and you can get it cheap enough, you put a squirt in there and you're not going to hurt anything, right? You know.
I think so. For which one was I going to say? So I don't do methylene blue right now because it's more. I struggle adding medication when it's not for a specific thing, just like ethically, I guess, or like I don't know what other word you'd use, but yeah, just because like I think people just blow the livers out of fish all the time, and I'm trying not to contribute, but that's for a different podcast. But I think obviously, as both of you have said, there's definite evidence for it working. I'm just not 100% it's like necessary. And then for the stress coat, I think it might work, it might not. To be honest, I haven't looked at it deep enough to have a definitive answer, but I'd be surprised if it made a major difference. And then the polyfill does definitely work from what I've read about. The only problem is it's so hard to get in New Zealand. So, like, if we could get polyfill, I'd probably use it because it's basically, in case you're listening and you don't know what it is, it's like, imagine like filter foam, like, just normal filter foam, but then it can absorb all sorts. And then when it absorbs it, it like changes color to indicate what it's absorbed. So, like, I think if it goes yellow, it means it's absorbed ammonia, or like blue means it's absorbed some other thing that I can't think of any examples for, but that's kind of the idea. But I think I would use that, but just can't get it.
So that's different to like an ammonia pad type of scenario. It's a different thing altogether.
I think it's the same idea, except because like an ammonia pad only absorbs ammonia, but then I think polyfill is like all the different pads combined into one, where it can absorb all the different things theoretically. Bearing in mind, I haven't looked at this for like a year, so I don't 100% remember, but that's ballpark the idea, I think, of it. And people just use like a little, like, $2 coin cut off piece. It's not like you need like a whole sheet's worth in the bag.
Yeah, just a small square.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of.
I know a lot of exporters and importers who send fish about. They will put a blue bag around the other bag so the fish can't see each other, or they'll put bits of plastic strips in the bag. I'm assuming it's to calm the fish down and not seeing each other. What are your thoughts on that?
I thought that was to stop them rolling around too much, but I don't know.
I would have thought they're in a dark box. They can't see each other anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was like, I don't think it's going to let any light through, but I could be wrong. I've never been put inside a box.
Well, it's another thing for you to do this week. I need you to find a poly box big enough for you. And
get inside the box.
Get inside it.
I'll sleep in there for a night with a heat pack and see what happens.
And film it for us, okay?
Yeah. All right. Tune in next week. All right, but yeah, I'm not 100%.
Overseas.
The only thing I think, the other reason I think people, it's not for all fish, but oftentimes it's for if stuff's going to spike a bag. They put that so they put like the fish in one bag, and then they get, it's not like a bag, it's like a little sock of like real thick plastic, and then they put that, and then they put the second bag. So it's like if a fish spikes the first bag and then it, oh my god, sorry to interrupt, we just got our first message on the Three Idiots Facebook page, so we made it.
Read it, and is it a liveable message? You can do a shout out to them. Go.
Wait, someone else talk for a second, and I'll read it, and I'll tell you if it's acceptable to read.
If it's appropriate.
So,
maybe just use first name, not first name, last name.
So there's obviously a lot of different methods when it comes to shipping, and I don't know if there's a right way or a wrong way in general. Like they're all kind of, if the fish arrive alive, that's the right way. If they arrive not alive, it's not the right way.
I think we'll all agree that the key things are you should purge the fish first. You should have good water. You should double bag the fish. The density of the fish in the bag is important. You don't want to jam too many in there. Overnight courier, being smart about the day that you send them, for whatever reason, knowing your local courier, knowing the courier that you're using.
Minimizing risk.
Just minimizing risk and just doing some real common sense shit. Some form of heating in there is probably not going to go amiss. Whether it's going to do anything, we're going to find out. But, just take some simple precautions, and generally it's okay.
Far away.
Update.
Okay, so I'll update you on the message. So I'm not going to tell you the person's name because anyone who goes on the Facebook pages will probably be able to work out who it is. But it's someone asking about suggestions for small little tangyikans for a tank. So it sounds pretty awesome. Wanting to know about options about Calvis or 5-bar lamps and whatever. But
boring. Let's not talk about
the first line says. The first line says, "Hi, I have a question for a future podcast that is definitely from me and not made up by Nelson Camps." So seems like a lie.
I already like this person, but I think it's probably Nelson Cam has just been tapping away on
made another fake account.
And then he put something in there about Tanganekans, knowing that it would excite the two of us and that he could go boring.
Exactly. It's a conspiracy.
I just don't know how he's
stay on topic this week.
I don't know how he is getting all these listens and all these follows from as one person. He must spend his whole day creating fake accounts to do
it. So I have a question for you guys. So do you guys think that there is, aside from the obvious, do you think there is much of a difference between sending, I wouldn't say a big fish, but a medium-sized fish, a, say, 12-centimeter fish compared to a 2-centimeter fish? And do you guys have any, I don't know, different practices or something for that?
Yeah, I hate sending big fish, so I
just scale it up. You just scale it up. Bigger bag, bigger box, bigger water. Away you go.
And you don't like doing it, Cam?
I
don't like shipping. Yeah.
It just increases the risk.
The bigger they are, the bigger the mess, really. But it can be done. You just got to have bigger bag, bigger fish. Single fish per bag is the key thing when they get bigger, especially with, obviously I ship a lot of African cichlids, but the most of my fish will go single fish per bag anyway, just as a general rule for African cichlids.
That's a separate problem though, because they just beat the hell out of each other if not. But
they just pulverize each other. Yeah,
they can't see each other. How do they beat each other up in the dark?
They're not beating each other up. They're just smashing themselves backwards and forwards, thrashing around, just pulverizing each other. Yeah, so it's not a good thing.
I'm going to say something that probably you won't agree with, but I have found that shipping bigger fish is so much easier because not big fish, but these medium-sized fish, say a good-sized peacock or something, because they seem a lot more tough. They can handle a lot more. They're a lot better at handling stuff. So, off the top of my head, the only sort of, I guess, I'd say bigger fish I've ever lost is that time the courier threw them over the fence and they froze. So, I don't know what to make of that, but I find they're a lot more resilient. Whereas, a little neon, if something goes wrong, is just going to kill over and die. Whereas, a peacock is not going to be happy, but is going to be fine, and then will bounce
Also,
back in a few days, and away you go.
Most of your peacocks have come from good breeders, and they're actually quite strong fish.
What a humble guy.
You know what I mean? Well, you get them in front of the guys too. You know, you get them in front of the people too.
Yeah.
But they've had a pretty good life. You know, they haven't had a hard time. They haven't just been shipped halfway across the world, and they've been on good food and good water conditions and stuff. So they will be quite resilient, probably compared to a lot of the imported stuff.
That is, though. I don't know if that's the only thing, because like that's the example I'm using, just because it's honestly more fun. But like,
too.
You know, I ship like I've shipped like an adult palgrami is like probably a similar size to some of these Africans, and they're the same when compared to like a tiny little palgrami or like a big festivum or a big, like, I'm not talking about like Oscar size stuff, but like these medium sized things, doesn't matter if they're from Asia or Africa or wherever, or if I bought them off an importer. Yeah, pretty much.
I won't ship
if I bought them off an importer or a breeder, it doesn't really seem to make too much difference. They seem to be able to handle it a bit better.
I've once shipped a 25 centimeter frontosa.
That sounds scary as all hell.
In this big box and a big bag. Well, the worst part was the person buying it was the only day they could receive it was a Friday. So I sent it I had to send it on a Thursday. And I was like, look, this isn't a good idea. Well, the couriers have been really reliable and everything had been ticking away so well. So I thought, yep, sweet, we'll give it a go. Didn't arrive on Friday. Couldn't find it on Saturday. So she didn't get the fish till Monday. And I was just like, there's absolutely no way this fish is alive. And it was sweet ass. And I was just like, I can't, the thought in my mind was, even though I've well packaged this fish and stuff, in my mind, it's only going to last a day. That's all this fish can last in these bags and stuff. Like I did get big bags and big box and all that sort of stuff, but it lasted, 3 days in the box, bag and stuff, and it was sweet as it survived. So
the other thing to consider is, like, as a general rule, like Lake Tanganyikans, like frontosas and stuff, ship not the best. So that's an added layer to.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we should just wait till they're 30 centimeters and fire them around the country.
Yeah, definitely not recommended.
Like
and it was a very stressful time because that was probably 15 years ago when frontosa were actually worth good money. Like that. It was a really expensive fish, and it was a prize fish. Like it was I
don't think there's enough money on the world. There's not enough money in the world to make me deal with that amount of stress, I don't reckon. There's like so many ways that could have gone wrong.
And
did go wrong.
And that is an example of the reason that I don't send fish anymore. Because even though
you're a moron and trying to send big ass fish to get lost on the stupid day.
Even though it made it, it was very stressful. It was a very stressful weekend, and the person was messaging me, and then they get into the blame game and all that sort of stuff, and it's just so it's just not worth it. I just say no to shipping on Thursdays now, and no to shipping in general. But yeah.
Do you have a water to air ratio that you try and apply? Because I know that's something that people are pretty hot on when sending fish as well.
A third water.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I usually go for like, maybe it's not best practice, but I go for like a quarter.
Yeah.
Like, obviously I don't measure it, but kind of like eyeball it. I go to like a quarter just because having the most, so I don't use oxygen, like, like pressurized oxygen, but I just use like atmospheric air, but I try to keep as much as possible for not so much for one of the main reasons is I think it stops them getting thrown about as much, like sloshed around as much. Particularly like if they're a little bit bigger, they can kind of steady themselves easier, and it's less momentum, like carting them around, which would not be as much fun for them, obviously.
And it is a balancing act between oxygen in the air and water to dilute ammonia and waste, isn't it? So
yeah, exactly.
Like you need to have enough water in there that if as they're crapping themselves literally because they've been chumped in a bag and smashed around the place, that they don't get poisoned, but you also want enough air that's sort of getting dissolved into the water for them to actually be able to breathe. So
exactly, like there's I will say there's one importer that Cam knows who I'm going to talk about, who I swear, like, it must be like 7/8 water with like 50 neons in a bag. And I'm like, this seems like a terrible idea. I don't know how. And like, I've asked them before to not do that, and then they ignore me. So I stopped buying from them. But that's a separate problem. But like,
Have you guys
that seems like
noticed?
that's going to be a terrible idea.
Did you notice when you were receiving fish from them a higher number of DOAs as a result of that, or just?
I didn't.
Because maybe they're onto something. I don't know. I just say I don't know. Also, if they've got pure oxygen, like the amount of oxygen in normal air is only 20%. If they're putting 100% oxygen in there, they do need less actual oxygen to get oxygen dissolved in the water. Is another discussion. Like it's 5 times more concentrated. So
yeah. So with it's a hard example for me because there's a lot of other issues with those people that I won't get into that contributed
mixed in with it.
Yeah, but for the shipping example, I personally noticed a higher rate of problems when compared to other people. But I don't know if that was shipping. Like DOAs was probably like pretty similar, like maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but close. But I noticed like the ones that I was saying before, the ones that are like just hanging on and then hang on for like 12 hours and then die was way higher from them. But I don't know if I ordered enough from them before I stopped buying from them to be able to say that that is definitely because of shipping, or maybe it's just like random chance or whatever. But that is what I found when I was dealing with them. That they would arrive alive, but they wouldn't live long enough to, bounce back essentially. So yeah.
Yeah, interesting. It'd be interesting to know that. But I think the concentration of oxygen would be interesting in that situation.
It would definitely be
dying,
something to consider.
Are they dying because they don't have oxygen, or are they dying? I mean, if they wouldn't have oxygen and they were dying, you'd think the whole lot would die if they're all the same fish. And if they were getting poisoned.
What I was thinking is that it's not enough to, like, for the most part, wouldn't be enough to kill them. But I was thinking it might be enough to do damage to their gills, where, like, over the course of, like, a few hours, they're, like, can't get enough oxygen in, even once they're in the tank, because the damage means that they can't take up enough oxygen. But,
and like humans, there will be fish
that
need different levels of oxygen than what other fish need, or have better gills and better whatever organs and all that sort of stuff. Some will just be weaker, some will be stronger, some will have conditions, some won't. And we just don't know. You don't know.
The example, like, so I didn't look into it because I was too sad. But when I lost a bunch of Africans the other day, one thing I did notice is because there wasn't enough oxygen because I did something dumb. But that's a story for another day. But I did notice both of the Freyieries died, which was, I didn't look into it to see if like they have a lower tolerance or whatever. But I was like, that's kind of interesting, but horrifically sad. So
yeah,
I'll throw that out there, but do whatever you want
different
with
fish. Different fish do need and do live and have evolved to live in different environments.
Yeah, of course. It's like, so a really fast flowing, like churning river is going to be different to like a stagnant puddle. So like, obviously.
I've heard you guys talk about it too. You say, "Oh, don't get the da-da-das from da-da-da because they're not shipping well," And often both of you have ordered the same fish and had a lot of deaths just in that one fish out of a whole shipment. So it's like there are individual requirements for certain fish that, I mean, we're probably never going to.
Because it's the hardest part is because even within that is it's hard to control everything except from the variable you're trying to track. Because like equally like because they go into a different place, so like outside temperature is colder, or Cam's putting them in a 2-foot tank, I'm putting them in a 1-foot tank, or like I put them with tank mates, they're on their own when they get there, or like
Even different between water from one city to another can be enough to cause a shift from one city to another.
Exactly.
Even different acclimatization techniques.
Yeah.
Some people might drop acclimatize, some people might just dump them in. You know what I mean? Like it's all.
Or even within the same method, like I might float them for 10 minutes, he might float them for 15 minutes, and for all we know, that's
a lot of variables.
That's where it takes over. But there's no way to know that, and it's hard because I'm not a lab. Like that's like stuff that it's like proper scientists are required because they know what they're doing, and I'm not. That's not my thing. So like,
I mean, realistically, we probably don't deal with enough fish to be able to establish it. Like overseas, they're probably dealing in 10,000, 100,000 fish a day. And they can actually track this and change stuff to get a result. If you're shipping 10, 20, even 100 neons every month, you're not really doing enough volume to be able to, right, we'll change this and see if we get an extra one or two survive. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's a scale thing as well.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to know best practices overseas because, like I think as you guys have kind of alluded to, there seems to be a little bit of a numbers game and a commodity on the shelf game where they say, hey, again, we're not importers or exporters, but it seems that if they say, hey, we've got 100,000 neons, we're happy to lose 10% in shipping. And then the importer would go, hey, if I buy 10,000 neons, I'm happy to lose 10%. And then they'll probably just factor that into their pricing and move on with life.
Yeah, exactly. And
the other thing that far away.
Oh, I was going to say I don't think that's right personally, but obviously
it's definitely not right that
they would.
On those numbers, on my example, right? If we were sending 100,000 fish for them to say it's okay for 20,000 of them to die. I mean, I don't know what their numbers are. Obviously, I'm just making it up. But if we were to say even 1,000 were going to die out of 100,000, it sounds too high to me. If we were doing those numbers with humans, it would be not recommended.
That's the same as sort of changing that mindset from a fish is a commodity on a shelf. You buy it for $1, you sell it for $2. This fish is a living animal. You want to treat it the best you possibly can, give it the best environment it can, give it the most love that you can, so it's having a good life, no matter at what point along the chain that it is.
Yeah, and but then it is a hard thing when you rely on that to feed your family and pay your mortgage. So you do have to at some stage make a business decision, but and it's interesting the ethics of the whole hobby. Even those of us that try and keep fish as ethically as possible is another whole other discussion because what's right and what's wrong, we don't, we can go around that all day.
I made a video the other day about this exact topic, but I explained it in a different way. But just when Cam was talking just then, all of a sudden it just like clicked in my head. Like there's like the most perfect way to explain it, I think, that I've seen. And like it's I mean, I don't know what to do with that information, and I don't think there's any right answer or wrong answer or anything like that. It's more of a question of at least people got to talk about it to start with, and then we can go from there. But I think it's something like the whole sort of commoditization of living things isn't as much talked about where that is in maybe cats and dogs and that kind of thing.
And I think we can. And I think also like going forwards in this current world that we live in, I don't want to get political or go down any rabbit holes, but things are getting more sustainable and minority groups are having more power. So if there is high losses and stuff and shipping fish and stuff, then it's only a matter of time before some of these groups and these organizations and stuff start going, and start having some ammunition essentially to start shutting stuff down. They've already had a massive impact. We can't sell live fish on Facebook because of lobbying and stuff like that by these groups in America. So we do need to be aware of it, I think, as an industry. Not that we can change much where we're sitting, but just I think it's an awareness there that if we keep having high numbers of DOAs, maybe someone will fucking say, nah, not importing live fish anymore. We're not big enough to do much, have much damage. to the political sense of New Zealand. If every fishkeeper voted, it's 1-2% of a vote, if that. Most people won't care that much.
Yep.
So yeah, interesting discussion for another day, I think.
The other thing that we haven't touched on that's fairly important is like the aftercare. So obviously, once they've left our hands, they go into customers' hands. What's the right practice to be dealing with that after the fact? Like Ryan said, drip acclimatization to plop and drops, and quarantining them once they arrived, feeding them, all that sort of stuff. I think that's vitally important as well for the fish and the shipping process, and for the well-being of them.
For me, I think it's...
Sorry, Karen.
Oh. I was going to say, I think it's important not to... I'm not the biggest fan of putting them straight into the main tank because of that stress thing. I think it's quite important to give them even just like a day or something to like calm down, like maybe get some food into them, that kind of thing. It probably isn't as important when you're talking about like tetras or something. But, if you're talking about something that's a bit more kind of boisterous, I guess, like not necessarily Africans, but even like, rams or something, I think it's good to give them some time to figure out what's going on so they can focus on one thing at a time instead of like putting them in and they got to like find a hide and like worry about this fish that's trying to beat them up and try to find some food and adjust the light and all this kind of thing. And like just slowing down the process so that they can figure it out better as they go along, and then it's less stress on them, and then they do better overall.
I think we'd all agree that a quarantine tank or an initial tank is definitely a really good idea. And the thing with it, the people often go, I don't want to get another tank there. I see them on Facebook Marketplace, little 60-litre tanks, little 60-centimetre tanks for like $50 with heaters and filters and stuff. Just chuck it in your cupboard somewhere, hide it away. Like it doesn't have to be set up. You don't have to run it all the time. Chuck it on your kitchen bench. Chuck the fish in there for a bit. I read a thing once from a commercial guy in the UK who imported a lot of wild caught, and he was saying that he quarantined them, and then he recommended putting like a cup of water from the main tank in the aquarium after a couple of weeks and start changing the water over, so that if there's any pathogens or any nasty stuff in the other tank, that they get used to it slowly once they've built up some immunity. Now, again, I think that's probably a really extreme example and probably useful for wild caughts more than anything. But it was interesting to see that he was a commercial operator. He had, they turned over tens or hundreds of thousands of fish. And that's the process that he used for a lot of his fish to have higher success rates. So it's interesting to think about those sorts of things, because if you do dump them in, like you say, and Nigel and Trevor and they're trying to beat them up, and then you chuck a food in they've never seen before, and then the water's different, and maybe your tank's got a little bit of ammonia or nitrate or whatever, and then they're still stressed from being in this bag, and they're just not going to have the best chance.
Yeah. What I've noticed is it's almost about day 10 that if anything is going to pop up from within, caused because of stress, it's normally about day 10 that things sort of begin to roll through, which is why I strongly advocate at least a 2-week quarantine type thing. But it's normally around that mark where something pops up. But on top of that, I've totally forgot what I was going to say. Over to you, Cam.
So I've heard you talk about that, and I've heard a few other people talk about that. And I must say, I haven't personally found that. What I find is like, if you get them through the first, like maybe 3 days, 2 or 3 days, then after that, they're fine. Like, kind of regardless. Unless there's like other outside factors, of course. But like for that, in terms of that like 10-day curse they call it, I personally haven't run into that. I've found definitely just the first couple of days of getting them settled and like getting some proper food into them and like getting some clean water through them and all that kind of thing is the most like kind of crucial part of the whole sort of process, I guess. But I mean, it's not like, people ask me about quarantining all the time. And I'm like, it kind of goes back to that thing I was saying before about there's so many variables. Like I can get literally the world's most healthy fish sent to me. and it can arrive on time or that. But that fish can just not deal with the stress well, same as like some humans don't deal with stress well, and then its immunity's all messed up, and then it gets all sick, and then it gets a chunk taken out of it by another fish, and then it's dead. So like, I always say like, quarantine is like, at the very, very, very least, it's not going to hurt. Like, there's no real negative to doing a quarantine, or not. Maybe quarantine's not the right word, but like, given the fish a sec to figure out what's going on, it's not going to hurt.
The only consideration with that could be if often I've found when you put fish, especially if you put like, say you're getting one peacock. Again, that's a stupid idea to add one peacock to an established African tank. But as an example, if you're getting one peacock and you stick them in a tank on your kitchen bench with just a sponge filter in it, that fish is going to be really stressed. So you do have to actually kind of settle them and give them a good environment in that quarantine tank to actually be in a healthy sort of. Some people stick them, and usually they're a bare bottom tank. Again, if you paint the bottom of the tank black, it makes them way more settled, because then it's not like a mirror all around them and stuff. Like they do a few things, like be wary that you need them to actually be settled and happy in that tank to actually sort of de-stress as well. You don't want that to be a stressful place as well,
Yeah, for sure.
I put down any death within 2 weeks of getting a new fish down to stress, unless it's very obvious it's something else. Just any sort of random thing that pops off within 2 weeks, I always just go, this is the stress of what's just happened for transit and shipping and stuff like that. And after that point, I begin investigations a bit deeper. I guess unless there's anything really blatantly obvious that's happened to it. But I think we just don't factor stress in it absolutely anywhere near enough to fish elephant fish transit.
Yeah, and it'll be stress, maybe an underlying condition, maybe a new condition, but it would take time to actually, materialize.
Yeah, for sure.
And what do you guys recommend for acclimatization? Like if you're sending someone a fish and they say to you, "Hey, what's the best way of acclimatizing this to my fish, to my tank, to when it gets here?"
I always just say float the bag for like not ages, just like maybe 10 minutes, and then go from just like chuck it straight in, because the problem either that or with what was I going to say? Oh, either that or like get in. If you're going to do a drip acclimation, you want to get all the ammonia out of there as easily as possible. So like it might be, if you're doing a drip acclimation over 2 hours, chuck like an ammonia pad or something in there to give it a second.
So you're talking about the fact that sometimes when you open the bag, the oxygen can react with the ammonia in the water that's already there, and you can have a massive spike which can stuff the fish, right?
Yeah, like I'm not like it's
Have you done any
not
tests
often
on
a
it?
fish.
It's a theory. I haven't seen much of it either, but I've always.
Wait, sorry, what was the question? I missed that.
Have you done any testing on this?
In terms of what?
Check
like
ammonia.
if they die.
Got to open the bag. Rockets ammonia.
Yeah, well, I mean, oftentimes you can just smell it. Like,
it smells like shit.
It stinks. Yeah, like it smells the same as like if you go get some ammonia, like cleaning ammonia kind of thing. So like, I haven't looked into it deeper than that, but that's what I looked at.
But what I usually do is just tip them into a bucket, and then tip all the water out so the fish is just swimming in the bare minimum amount of water, and then double it out of water from the tank, pretty much straight away, and try and dilute that ammonia and any waste out of the water.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the best option.
It's really hard because
opinion,
is that more stressful on the fish than doing it slowly? I like there's all these things, these variables.
The thing I think with that is I think it's more about the ammonia like doing actual like physical damage to the gills and that, rather than the stress factor. Is kind of the thing I'd say would be more long-term important, but hard to know. Hard to measure.
I'm a big fan of drip acclimatization. I work on the theory that most people with saltwater fish, they drip acclimatize because there's so many different chemicals that they're trying to mix to get it right for the fish. But in freshwater, there's so many different chemicals that are in the water that we don't test for, calcium, magnesium, blah, 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 that the fish still have to acclimatize to. So like the whole just tip it into a net, chuck it in, I don't think it's the right option. However, a lot of people will then argue that, well, my copper band butterfly is costing me $300, but my neon tetras only cost me $5. And then the argument comes back to a life is a life, a fish is a fish. You're trying to do the best for them, regardless of what they cost.
The fish doesn't know how much it costs.
100%. But I'm also aware that I think the vast majority of people just open the bag and either tip the bag in the water in or catch the fish and put them straight in the tank.
I think for me, for the specific sort of time of acclimatization, for me, I think it's more about physical stuff rather than the stress-related stuff, because they're going to be stressed either way. So it's like getting them into clean water as fast as possible to stop their gills getting shredded or whatever. I don't know if that's right or wrong or what.
Conversely,
that's my opinion, at least, I think.
If they're swimming around in that water and they've been in that water for the last 24 hours and they're not turning upside down and they're not gasping at the surface, that water's probably okay.
But but because the thing is, without the oxygen exchange, then it's ammonium, not ammonia, and then it's less toxic. So when you pop the bag, then all the gas exchange happens and all the oxygen goes in and all the CO2 goes out, and then the ammonia shoots up, which is, I think, the problem, I guess. If there was a way to kind of transfer that slowly, then maybe that's different.
So the pH would probably be fluctuating at the same time, I suspect, as well. Because low makes ammonium. So it's going ammonia spike from ammonium and then a massive pH swing ridiculously quick as well. At a guess.
And there's no way to avoid that.
Well, I guess if you're sending with 100% oxygen, you probably have a lot of oxygen in that water already that's already been doing that transfer, right?
In theory.
Well, like, because if you're adding 100% oxygen to a bag, and then the fish is consuming a little bit of it in the shipping, and then you've only got 20% oxygen in the air that's around you. When you open that bag, it's an interesting one. I've definitely heard the theory. I haven't seen it myself. You know what I mean?
Do you know what I'm thinking of right now? I'm thinking of that meme, and it's like my last two brain cells fighting to the death. That's what this conversation feels like. I don't think any of us know enough to have opinions, anyway, to be honest.
Okay, so we agree that some form of acclimatization is probably required, and there is a caution there that sometimes when you open the bag, the ammonia levels and stuff can spike. So you do need to put some precautions in there for that. I'd probably dilute the water pretty much straight away, so you're at least negating that is what I'd probably do.
Yep, but no, makes sense.
And drip acclimatization, you can Google that. I don't think it's a bad thing to do either. I think it does give the fish a better chance. But again, everything's being monitored. You know, if the fish starts, you open the bag and the fish starts turning over, obviously the ammonia's shot up and you've got some dramas, so you need to deal with it quickly. And that might be a case of dumping it.
It might even be the case where I think maybe we can dedicate a whole podcast episode to acclimatization, because I feel like we could definitely go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
But anyway, cool. I think we've pretty much run out of time now, haven't we? And I think we've covered shipping.
Way over.
Which I thought we wouldn't have enough content for a whole podcast at the beginning of this.
We could go on for another 2 hours quite easily, I think.
But anyway, I don't think we actually know enough about what we're talking about. So we'll just
That's
leave
why
it
the podcast has the name it does.
Yeah, we're just all rambling about shit. Anyway,
exactly.
We're going to sign off now. I think that Cam Inbreed is going to do a little feature on the shipping methods and the heating pack scenario, and we're going to have a definitive answer on that. And Cam agrees that whatever the right answer is, he's going to do that from now on, and he's going to admit that he was wrong if he was wrong. And I'll admit that heat packs work if they actually do. And I think we're going to dub that into the end of this, so it's going to be a bit weird. And then next week we are going to do some other unknown topic. So we'll see you then. Please like and subscribe and buy the merch, and we'll be all the way, and everyone will be happy.
Sounds good. See you later.
See ya.
Have a good one, guys. There we go, all outside, ready to go. The heat pack with the hole in it was 29.2 when sealed off, and the heat pack with no hole was 31.1 when sealed off. We'll leave them overnight and I'll open about 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Let's go! So the results are in. Just the heat pack sitting in the box. The heat pack itself was 29.3, the bag was 13.6. The water bottle was 12.3, the bag was 13.8. Nothing whatsoever at all. The bag was 12.5, and the one that we taped that with the hole to it into the poly box, the heat pack was 20.8, but the bag was 11.8. Bearing in mind last night was ridiculously cold here in Nelson. There was a significant frost on the cars and it got down to about 1 degree. So there we go.